We are so excited to have Whole Foods Market as a new sponsor because it just makes sense. We're all about good food and healthy choices, so this feels like such a natural fit. And fall is the season where we always end up hosting. Whole Foods Market makes it so easy to pull together a spread that feels special without stressing. For us, frozen pizzas are a go-to, and right now they're 50% off with Prime. And since Halloween is around the corner, I love that all the candy at Whole Foods Market is made without synthetic red dyes, no high fructose corn syrup, and no artificial sweeteners, which obviously is my jam. And the best part, if I'm busy with the podcast, I can just order pickup or delivery and still look like I planned it all out. Make your next fall gathering delicious and memorable with Whole Foods Market. Save 50%. That's right, 50% with Prime on select frozen pizzas through October 28th. Terms apply. Visit your local Whole Foods Market today, in-store or online. Happy fall.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast and are not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business, individual, anyone, or anything.
I'm Sarah Edmondson.
And I'm Anthony Nippy Ames, and this is A Little Bit Culty.
We woke up from a cult, and that journey was captured in The Vow on HBO and in my memoir, Scarred.
Now, in this podcast, we break down the shame and secrets that make these experiences so destructive with honest conversations on how seemingly benign groups can cross into the cultiverse and how to spot and recover from trouble if it happens to you.
Each week, we bring in experts, survivors, and whistleblowers to explore red flags, resilience, and even share a few laughs because sometimes you gotta laugh.
Subscribe to our Patreon for early and ad-free listening, some live Q&A, and exclusive content at patreon.com/alittlebitculty.
Welcome to Season 8 of A Little Bit Culty. Welcome back, everybody, to Part 2 with Joe Szimhart. If you missed Part 1, this one might not make too much sense. We highly recommend going back to the previous episode in your feed and see you soon for Part 2. Here we go. What do you do to prep for doing an intervention with somebody?
It varies a lot. And everyone that's done this in my small peer group, there aren't that many people that have been in. There have been hundreds of them in and out of it, but not as long as like someone like I or Steve Hassan or Patrick Ryan or those kinds of people that you might know. So everyone has their own way of doing it, but in general, you try to get to know the situation as best you can through the phone, through email, through Zoom, or through personal meeting with the concerned family, the concerned party. And the best way to do it is you meet with the concerned party for at least a full day, maybe longer, to prepare them for the intervention and to see if they even want to go ahead with it. They might not want to go ahead with it. It might not be an opportune time. I tell them that you don't have to do the intervention. I can help you prepare for the long haul. There are people that have decided not to intervene, and the person left the group in 2 years, and the family was prepared to help them because they did the preparation. When they also were prepared not to make it worse by constantly trying to feed them information or arguing with them or whatever. So the idea was for the family to try to gain rapport with that person before you did the intervention so that it would be easier to do an introduction. Like, for instance, the person may have not visited home for over a year. How do you get them home? Well, you stop arguing about the group. You tell them, maybe we misunderstood you. Tell us a little more about what you're doing. And you listen, you don't argue. And you get to the point where they're willing to come home again. And then you spring it on them. You invite these people knocking on the door into the house and see if the person wants to talk. So, yeah, preparation is really important. It doesn't mean you're going to end up doing an intervention just because there's a preparation with the family.
I have a question for you that we asked. We have a friend of ours who has one of their children who's kind of in a cult of one, but in a high control group. And I asked the parents.
Who listened to the show, by the way. Hi, guys. You'll know who you are.
Like, when do you use force? When does it become a situation where you think your child might be in danger, and how do you ascertain, like, because I know if my son was in a situation, I don't know that I wouldn't go in there guns a-blazing and say, give me my effing kid back.
That's why this whole deprogramming thing started with the kidnapping stuff. Ted Patrick and on the West Coast more so, and then there was Galen Kelly on the East Coast, who I knew and worked with at one time. I never worked with Ted. I did meet him once, Black Lightning, at a conference. Yeah, he was quite a character, but then he had his faults. He overdid it. He became a legend in his own mind, which was a mistake when you're in this field. Nobody's a hero. You're just a working person. You're helping families. You're not the center of attention. And if people try to do that to me, I would back off. I'm not your guru. I'm not here to help you. There's other people that can help you after the intervention. So that impulse to take them out is very strong in human beings. You have the Hatfield girl runs away with a McCoy boy. Well, the Hatfields go and kidnap her back to bring her back into the fold, and then they have a gunfight. So that instinct is just there. And I think that's how come we ended up with this whole saga of the kidnap deprogramming as the way to get people out of brainwashing cults. In fact, there was a whole movement in the old Cult Awareness Network in the 80s, a coterie of people that believed that if you just exit counseled someone, which is mostly what we were doing, in other words, they talked to you of their own free will, they weren't really brainwashed. If people were really brainwashed, you had to kidnap them. This is what the talk was back then, which was BS. That's not how this whole thing works. And there was a total misunderstanding of what mind control or thought reform was, even among the anti-cult crowd. So I knew a lot of those people too, and back in those early days. But the idea that you need to help rescue someone, especially if you think they're wasting their inheritance, which a lot of them do, they might be endangering their health because now they're on all these weird diets, doing enemas, like in the Church Universal that I was in, they were doing high colonic enemas for a period of time to cleanse their inner self. A lot of people were losing a lot of weight. They look kind of pasty, and glassy-eyed. I didn't get into it that deeply, but so yeah, you would think I got to get my kid out of there. My 25-year-old kid, they're hurting themselves. And that's what led to that kind of behavior. And so it wasn't always the best thing to do. A lot of times the cure was worse than the disease. And people ended up going back to the group anyway, especially if it was an abusive type of an approach where they're getting yelled at and there was no rapport. Some of these deprogrammers were kind of like John Wayne attacking Indians. And most of them were pretty good people, were pretty nice people. They were ex-members. They understood what the people were going through. Even Ted Patrick's technique, the only reason it worked so well is he had ex-members come in to set up the case for him before he ever came in. And by the time he came in, they had already done the job. The ex-members were a lot more, and he would take the credit and the money, and he had like an industry going where sometimes he had 2-3 cases going at once. It was that weird.
Ted Patrick, by the way, Nippy, we just learned about him in the Brainwashing book, Instability of Truth, which you would love if you have not read it yet. It just came out by Rebecca Lemov, who teaches at Harvard. And she mentions Ted Patrick, and if I'm counting correctly, he's the one who was worried about his son in Children of God, and he went to check it out and almost got recruited.
Yeah, he almost got recruited, and he realized that that's when he came up with this idea that they're hypnotizing him. He had a very crude understanding of hypnosis, but he was somewhat effective in what he did with Bible-type cults, but not with much else.
Have you ever had to turn down an intervention? Like, has there ever been somebody that's asked you to get involved and you've looked at the group and said no?
I have. It's not so much the group, because some of the groups I dealt with were very dangerous and my life was threatened, more or less. That's happened. But I'm still here, by the way.
Yeah. You made it.
But it was more the family dynamics that I couldn't get past. For instance, I got called up to this is more extreme, but I got called up to a rather secretive meeting in New York City once in the 1990s. Yeah, mid-90s. And it was with Orthodox Jewish people that were connected. They were part of the anti-cult, connected to the Jewish Hotline back then, which was a bigger organization that supported Jews. But anyway, they questioned me about helping with an intervention. And one, their idea was they wanted to bring the young Jewish guy that joined some guru India group back to the Jewish fold. And two, they wanted to know if I was willing to work with security. And this is after I quit doing any cases like that, because I stopped. The last case I did with any kind of security was in 1992. It was a very successful case, but I never did another one again because I that following year, I went on trial for a kidnapping case gone wrong in Idaho. And it was a month-long trial. I was acquitted of all charges, including misdemeanors, but it was expensive. And
You don't want to do that again.
well, I never touched the coercive case again after 92. So once these people said, are you willing to do that? And I said, well, number one, I don't reconvert people back to their religion. That's not the purpose of this whole thing.
Right.
The purpose is to give them a choice out of a constricting type of it's like a social spiritual thing that they're in. And what they do with that information is up to them after that, as far as I'm concerned. And two, no, I don't work with security. So they said goodbye. So I left the room.
Well, as you were talking there, I just realized, like, obviously there's cases like myself and Nippy who joined a cult and our parents were worried. But is there ever a time where children just develop their own belief system and the parents think it's a cult?
Yeah.
And the kids are fine?
Sounds like that's what I just described. Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, it has happened. I mean, not quite as simply as that. But let me give you 3 examples of what that could be, because I've had cases. One case I had, it was a coercive case, and I was brought in after it started. And it was a young man that was influenced by an older gentleman who wasn't necessarily of the same fundamentalist religion as the mom and the dad in Christianity. And the religious definition among evangelicals of cult is heresy. In other words, they don't believe what we do in terms of Christianity. That is what a cult is to them. In fact, they believe the Catholic Church is a cult and Anglicanism is a cult. And, so they use a religious definition. I don't. So I had to beg the mom off a bit of, you got to back off here. And this was just more of a kind of an anxious young man who had a sort of a mentor outside of the family that was now competition with the families, and the family perceived it as cult influence. So it didn't quite fit that definition. And in fact, the intention of the mother, kind of like the Orthodox Jews, was to bring her somewhere back into the fold. I said, that's not what I do. And I had to back off from that case. And of course, the mother was really pissed off because after I got there, and I told them to just call it off. In another case, I came in with a more seasoned exit counselor that I worked with, and he took this case. And it was about Jehovah's Witnesses influencing this son who was about 21 years old from this family that was just kind of an average Christian family, nothing too serious. And the person I was working with was a former Mooney. And I came in and I met the young man, and I had worked in an institution in the early 70s for what they used to call brain damaged and retarded people, and now it's intellectually disabled or whatever. It was a large institution. I worked there for 2 years, so I understood a lot about mental illness by the time I left there, before I went to art school. And I recognized right away after talking to this young man that he was schizophrenic. And his ideation was just like in that weird spectrum of schizophrenia. And he had friends that were Jehovah's Witnesses that were more or less trying to recruit him and help him and pray for him or whatever. And so I had to call that intervention off. And what I did was I got the family to introduce me to the Jehovah's Witness couple. And I tried to explain to them that this young man has a mental illness. And I had to explain it to my partner who didn't understand schizophrenia in the intervention trade. And I said, the family's having enough of a struggle with it. They don't need the pressure of you trying to convert him to this religion. Mm-hmm. He's vulnerable. You should leave him alone. I don't think the Jehovah's Witness couple that I talked to really understood what I was talking about.
I believe that.
Because they had a very brittle understanding of mental illness. Mm-hmm. So it was a very difficult intervention. But again, the young man's version of cult was in his head. Mm-hmm. He had this other world mixing in Jehovah's Witness with this and that. And people like that are generally kicked out of cults because they are not deployable agents.
Yeah,
you can't manage somebody with schizophrenia when he's in a cult unless all he does is sweep the floor. So if you want that kind of a person to do something, you're going to have a problem, especially if they're not on medication and having a florid episode. And almost invariably, what we call cults, which tend to be tightly organized, will kick those people out. I've been invited to mental hospitals over the years before I began working in one to try to talk to people that were kicked out of cults that then were put into a mental institution to assess if this is cult ideation or if this is mental illness that's going on. And sometimes it's both.
That's complicated.
It gets complicated, yeah, but at least I had some skill at that. Is why, and now I have a lot more. After 25 years in a mental hospital, I can sort it out pretty quickly. In other words, I did hundreds and maybe thousands of mental status exams, helping psychiatrists to fill out their forms as well. So I have a feel for that, on how to assess somebody's mental disposition according to the DSM, the standards that are set down in that field.
Are you still doing interventions, Joe?
I do, but I did like 3 at the end of last year. I haven't done any this year. These things come in waves. I don't really advertise myself that much. I don't look for it. We're in the middle of, I've had to repair this house. I was taking care of my mom a lot. I just avoided them,
Yeah.
But I will do them if it looks like a case I could help with. The last one I had was in Reno. I was out there twice at the end of last year.
This episode would not be possible without the support of our sponsors. Let's hear what they have to offer. You know that first crisp fall morning when you break out the oversized sweaters and pretend you're starring in your own coffee commercial? Yeah, it's a vibe. Okay, but here's the real secret. The best part of fall is what's underneath. MeUndies. Thank you for sponsoring this podcast, MeUndies. Their micromodal fabric is basically like a cozy little hug for your butt. Lightweight, breathable, and perfect for layering season. And this year, their Halloween collection is everything. I'm talking spiderweb all over lace. Yes, it's as gorgeous as it sounds. And glow-in-the-dark undies that are somehow spooky and sexy. With over 20 styles and 100 colors and prints, there's literally a cut for every butt. Plus, MeUndies are sustainably made, unbelievably soft, and backed by 90,000 five-star reviews. Fall is officially better from the bottom up. I love my lace full bottom panties, sexy but also practical. I wear those under my shorter dresses, and I gotta say, I love my husband in his MeUndies boxers. Very soft and hugs everything in all the right places, if you know what I mean. Right now, as a listener of our show, you can get cozy and spooky for less with deals up to 50% off at MeUndies.com/culty and enter the promo code culty. That's MeUndies.com/culty, promo code culty for 50% off. MeUndies, comfort that's made for fall. Anybody else feel their anxiety spike when you hear the question, "What's for dinner?" and you haven't planned anything? This is like a daily problem. Not anymore, though. Thank you, Hungry Root, not only for being our sponsor, but for sending us a box of groceries and for changing our lives. Hungry Root fills your cart with personalized groceries and recipes based on a quick quiz, and it gets smarter every time you order. We're tracking over 15,000 recipes, many of them ready in 15 minutes or less, hello, plus snacks, sweets, smoothies, even supplements. Whether you're gluten-free, dairy-free, high-protein, high-maintenance, or just hungry and cranky, or hangry as they say, they've got you. And because everything is high quality and screened for junk ingredients, you can feel good about what you're feeding the family. Hungry Root saves you tons of money too. Less food waste, fewer impulse buys, and way fewer last-minute takeout bills. The Hungry Root experience has completely changed how we do food in our household. Thank you, Hungry Root, for being our new sponsor. And please do take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/culty and use code culty. That's hungryroot.com/culty, code culty to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/culty, code culty.
Some days your brain just needs a vacation your wallet can actually handle. That's why I love IntoCloud. Whether it's answering endless emails or juggling daily chaos with the kids, you deserve a better way to unwind. IntoCloud serves up federally legal THC products that are all Farm Bill compliant and third-party tested, so you get smooth relief without driving across town to a dispensary. So, if you're 21 or older, head to intocloud.co and use code CULTY to get 25% off your first order plus free shipping. That's intocloud.co, code CULTY, 25% off, free shipping. I take it sometimes just when I want to chill. Sometimes I take it before I go to the gym. Gets me deeper in my lifts, blocks those cannabinoid receptors. Know what I'm saying? No sketchy loopholes, just easy, legit chill for grown-ups. Over 50,000 people already trust IntoCloud to upgrade their downtime because feeling good should also be hassle-free. Take a break that feels as relaxing as it is legal. Whether you're chasing deeper sleep, better focus, or just some peace between your streaming marathons, this is how adults get elevated now. If you're 21 or older, now's your chance to float above the stress because EndoCloud is giving all new customers 25% off their first order plus free shipping. Just use code CULTY or click the link in the show notes to claim your discount. That's endocloud.co, INDACLOUD.co. Use code CULTY for free shipping plus 25% off your first order. Fill out their quick survey when you order to support this show and make your week way more enjoyable. All thanks to EndoCloud.
Did you skip over all the ads? We hope you didn't. Thank you to our sponsors, and thank you for listening. Now, let's resume our culty convo.
What do you see today? What are your concerns today when you look out into the world?
I see too much. There's 4 things that I look at generally. There could be 50, but I boiled it down to 4 categories. If there's some kind of harmful cult activity or harmful influence activity going on. And the first thing I look for, is there a transcendent attraction, something which is expanding the person beyond who they normally are? They're going to a self-help group. They're interested in some esoteric philosophy, like they might be reading Rajneesh books, whatever. What's the attraction? What is it? And then I look at, is there some authority figure, some management that's identifying and clarifying and teaching about whatever that transcendent attraction is. So in your case with Nexium, it was whatever his name was.
Keith.
I forget. Yeah, Keith. He had another moniker. What was that?
Vanguard.
It was called Vanguard, as opposed to Source, like Werner Erhard was Source.
Yes.
Yeah. It was like that.
Although Keith did start a program called The Source, so I think he was just trying to plagiarize where he could.
So there's the authority figure I look for, and then I'm looking for something I call orbiting. Is this becoming the center of this person's life? Are they on a new planet now, and their satellite, and and a lot of their mental and behavioral attention is on this new thing, this transcendent thing. It could be A Course in Miracles that they're doing, and they're in other words, they're overvaluing it. This is the word I've come to use. Are they overvaluing this particular therapy, this particular guru, this particular It's actually a term that's used in mental health more in England than in the United States, to have an overvalued idea. It's opposed to delusion. It's not quite delusional, which is more of a disorder. We can all overvalue something. Like we can overvalue the New York Mets, for instance, when you're really a fan and you overdo it.
Get obsessive.
That'd be a frustrating group to overvalue.
So you're not delusional, but you are overvaluing it, and it can be frustrating for people that aren't overvaluing around you. So I look for that they're orbiting. It's what I call social orbiting. And then the final thing I'm looking for is what Lifton called dispensing of existence, what I call exit perils. What are the dangers of leaving this now? What's going to happen if you stop it? What's preventing you from questioning it, from doubting it? Is there some threat to your soul? Is there a threat to you physically? Is there a threat to you financially? Socially? Is there a threat to your self-esteem? Like, are you going to be embarrassed if you think this is stupid at some point or somebody points it out? What's the exit cost? That is what Professor Zablocki, Ben Zablocki, who was great in this field, determined constitutes what we call brainwashing. He did a big longitudinal 20-year study on this with a group called the Exclusive Brethren. And he was seeing that it's not what people did. Brainwashing is not what people do to you to get you in. That's influence. That's salesmanship. That's whatever.
Persuasion.
It's what you do to yourself, what you're doing to yourself to keep yourself in. What is it going to cost me to leave? I'm going to lose my friends. I'm going to lose my investment. I might lose my life. I might lose my soul. So now the policeman in your head starts to monitor these thoughts of doubt, thoughts of leaving, and blocking you. In other words, coercing you to stay in the group. You're doing it to yourself. And that's a successful thought reform program, is to get the person to do it to themselves.
I like that.
Because then you have a deployable agent. Then you have someone like they called perfect soldiers, these engineers or whatever that became pilots from the Middle East, from Al-Qaeda, that commandeered those planes in 2001 when they took down the Twin Towers and the Pentagon and whatever. Those guys were living in the United States not under any kind of physical coercive control. It was all in their heads. Mm-hmm. And they were having phone contacts or whatever. They were good neighbors. But they were brainwashed in that sense, in that there was exit perils. They wouldn't be good Muslims if they turned against it. They would lose their heavenly whatever passage. They would betray a whole culture if they didn't go through with their murderous acts. So that's one way to look at brainwashing, is more or less the exit pearls, the exit costs, the cost of defection.
Yeah, the emotional prison that they're in.
Yeah, and of course the cognitive dissonance theory comes in because it's a lot easier to maintain your beliefs and rationalize them than to change your mind. During a lot of the interventions I did that were 4 or 5 days long, I would see people go through changes from one day to the next where things are starting to make sense. They're beginning to talk about the group in the past tense without even knowing it, without realizing it. That's when I know we're on our way out, even though they're claiming they're holding on. But they're saying things like, well, I remember when we did. And as soon as I hear past tense words, I know there's a psychological change going on in the person's head during the intervention. And I can breathe a little better. I can think, well, now I can educate. Yeah. Now I can get to the point of educating.
They've distanced themselves.
Answering questions.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's neat to see. Sometimes it happens rather quickly, but it doesn't happen without stress. I've had people actually get nauseous when this change is going on. They get severe headaches. We have to take a break for half a day or a day. I've had a guy in a martial arts cult who voluntarily came to see me because I had exit counseled his friend just the day before, and he brought him to my hotel room. And all he would do was just listen. There's a guy who used to be like a Navy SEAL in the Norwegian Navy. He was tough as hell, and and he was angry that his friend brought him to me, but the friend said, just listen to him. And he said, you tell him what you did to me. And the guy said, I'm just going to listen. I'm not going to talk. So I went through 4 hours of stuff with my partner, videotaped the wave and explained all this and that. And this guy stood up quietly, and he starts pacing in his hotel room back and forth. And then he starts yelling, and he says, when I came into this room, I knew that there was no way, no fucking way anybody could talk me out of this group, and now I'm out. And he was just back and forth. And it was one of the most extraordinary interventions I ever did. But it was because I had rapport. I had already got his friend out, and he had rapport with him. So there was a bridge, a trust bridge. And all he did was listen. I didn't try to talk to him or sell myself at all because I was already sold when he came in the room. But he was definite that, this is a guy who's trained not to break under stress if he was kidnapped as a soldier. And all this was information, educational information. That's all it was. And he was out of the group.
Amazing.
His parents came by the next day because I was still in the hotel, and they came by and, what did you do to our son? So I had to go through the whole thing with them. Well, we just went through an education process, and he changed his mind.
Amazing. How do you help people relieve the cognitive dissonance? Because that's something that I can't, I know that we had it, and then one day our shelf broke and we could see everything. But if people don't have that wake up moment themselves, how do you give it to them? What's the best way to break the shelf with them or for them, or what's your approach to that? Well,
I think you have to find something that gives them a window out of the group that they can connect with,
Yes.
That's real for them. I'll give you an example. I had a Church Universal and Triumphant case where this young woman, her husband didn't want her in the group, and the whole family, like 20 of them, were there at the beginning of the intervention, and I had to chase a bunch of them away, so we only had 3 people there, plus my partner. And nothing was making sense to her. She wasn't that deep into the group, but she was really into it. So the person can be really total believers, but not. She hadn't gone to a major conference. She hadn't become a keeper of the flame. She didn't because her husband was kind of trying to keep her out of it. But there was one thing that got her in that I found out by accident. She had read these books by a guy named Baird Spalding, The Teachings of the Masters of the Far East, which also informed the I Am cult. These books came out starting in the 1920s, and this guy Spalding claimed that he had been to the Far East, he had met the masters in the Himalayas, and they taught him all this magical stuff, and he wrote about it in the books. Well, I was able to demonstrate to her that the first 2 books this guy wrote, he had never been to India when he wrote them, and he had claimed he had gone in his astral body to India. And so when she realized that the concrete, because in the beginning of the book, it definitely says he was in India. It didn't say his astral body. But I showed her evidence of that. It took me about a half hour. That one thing was enough to break the whole house of cards for her.
Right.
It all began to fall apart. And so the cognitive dissonance dissipated at that point. Now, the feeling of losing like-minded people and all this spirituality, that took a while to overcome. It would for anybody. Different people have different associations with cognitive dissonance, and it takes them longer to rationalize out than continuing to rationalize in, if that makes sense. because you are rationalizing. You're using your reason to help kick in your primal thinking process, which is instinct and feeling and whatever, into really exiting that feeling part, that instinctual part, what they call in dual process thinking, stage one, which is most of us, the intuitive part of us, takes a lot more non-cognitive kind of resocialization for that to adjust to a new world outside the group. It's that feeling of social connection. It's not rational necessarily.
Even cult podcasts need sponsors, everyone. Check out these must-haves.
Guess what happened this week? I saw a little brown leaf fall from the tree in my backyard, and I said to myself, yes, Sarah, fall is here. You know what that means? I can start updating my wardrobe with some Quince essentials. Yes, Quince makes it ridiculously easy to stay polished, cozy, and save money without ever skimping on quality. I'm obsessed with their fall essentials. Think 100% Mongolian cashmere sweaters starting at just $50, perfectly tailored denim, and washable silk tops and skirts that make getting dressed effortless. My personal favorite this season? It's kind of hard to choose. I'm loving all the leather jackets and the denim. So many things are in my cart right now. Don't get me started on their wool coats, specifically designer level style, but at a fraction of the price. And honestly, the craftsmanship rivals pricier brands that I've tried. Quince partners directly with ethical, high-end factories and cuts out the middlemen, so you get these luxury wardrobe updates for way less. If you want to upgrade your fall look in a way that's smart, stylish, and easy, Quince is definitely your move. Treat yourself. You deserve it. Keep it classic and cozy this fall with long-lasting staples from Quince. Go to quince.com/culty for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/culty to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/culty.
You hear that? That's not just a Toyota truck. That's the sound of no crowds, no alerts, no distractions, and no telling what you'll find next. You know, like a detour. So why would you ever take a tour when you could take a detour? Toyota trucks.
Hey everyone, it's Nippy here, and I'm here to tell you about the new addition to our thoroughbred lifestyle. As we've shared, Sarah and I are pretty healthy, or we try to be. And now there's a new sheriff in town, AG1. We do the smoothies, the gym sessions, the whole deal. And it's still tough to get every nutrient into our bodies to keep this podcast gold going. Finally, we tried AG1 and thought, all right, let's see if this lives up to the hype. And spoiler alert, it does. AG1 is a daily greens powder with 70 plus vitamins, minerals, and whole food source nutrients and 5 probiotic strains in one scoop. It's like our entire supplement routine gets replaced with something that actually fits our lifestyles. It's clinically shown to support gut health, fill nutrient gaps, and boost whole body health. Since we started, we both noticed the energy bump, no mid-afternoon crashes, and our digestion has been on point. The new AG1 Next Gen, they've stepped it up with killer flavors, tropical berry, citrus, plus the original. No more pills, one scoop, in the water, boom, on our day. What I love is how AG1 backs it up with gold standard clinical trials. In an industry full of empty promises, they're doing the real work. Peer-reviewed, rigorous science to prove it. For less than $3 a day with a subscription, you're getting over $7 worth of premium nutritional support. That's a no-brainer for simplifying your wellness. Want to try it? Head to drinkag1.com and use code CULTY for free 1-year supply of vitamin D3 plus K2 and 5 free travel packets with your first order. Head to drinkag1.com/culty to get a free welcome kit, including a bottle of vitamin D and free AG1 travel packs when you first subscribe. That's drinkag1.com/culty. Sponsor break's done. Now back for more culty stories.
And again, it gets back to this one principle, which happens in so many new age groups, but in a lot of groups that we call cults, the idea of personal experience. Like if I didn't experience the guru giving me a blowjob, well, then I don't know if he really does that. And I'm talking about Satya Sai Baba. He used to do this to his young male disciples, the big guru in India that died a while ago, had like millions. So what I try to do is back up. I said, well, that kind of thinking is what probably got you in the cult to begin with. Personal experience. You had a personal experience that was good, and you relied on that to inform everything else. The human creature, being what we are, should begin with personal experience as a way to assess reality and then confirm it with other means. So it's not just personal experience that informs us, because we can be fooled by personal experience. For instance, the map of nature can be, things can hide themselves. You might not see the tiger in the shadows, and your experience is that it's not there, yet it could kill you, right? So vicarious experience is necessary for us to survive well, to thrive. If you only use your personal experiences, what these fake gurus want you to do, they can manipulate that. That's easy to manipulate, personal experiences. So I would get you to question the idea that your personal experience is the only way to figure out whether this guy is fake or not. How else can we do that? Can you trust vicarious experience? Someone else's. How do you assess that? How can you question someone that had the experience that this guru hit them? You can just sit with them and listen and just feel that out in a way. You can cross-reference it with other sources to see if it matches. And if your sources are trustworthy, like for instance, you're researching something and there's an academic that does a math problem and everybody's convinced that he solved this problem, well, you're trusting yourself to look at the way he solved the problem so you can apply it to the thing you're studying. That's vicarious experience. You're using his experience, his solution, to help you inform your solution. So I would try to convince people to be a little bit more rigorous about examining circumstantial evidence and whatever else is going on. Does the person act and behave like a narcissist? Is there a reason for him to yell at somebody or verbally abuse somebody that questions him? In other words, because you say, well, I've never saw him yell at anybody, but is that kind of person likely to do that? So you would build a circumstantial case in your head. So you don't have absolute proof. I mean, this is like people say, well, how do you know this is a cult? You haven't experienced it. And I go, well, okay, so you're telling, I use the example of whiskey because it alters your state of consciousness, right? And I go, so you're giving me a brand from Scotland, a single malt that's never been sold outside the country. And I'm saying, well, I don't need to drink that to know what that is. And what do you mean you don't need to drink that to know what that is? I go, well, it's whiskey. I've drank whiskey before. And just because you put a different label on it doesn't mean that it changes what it can do to me, So if somebody comes up to me with a new large awareness group training thing that's a spin-off of Gurdjieff and whatever, they're all silver mind control or whatever, and they slap a new label on it, and I find out what they do, and you're not allowed to tell people what happens during the weekend and all this stuff. I said, well, I'm not going to go and drink that. You're just relabeling the same, you're remapping the same territory. I know the territory. I would do what's called active listening, which I was trained to do, especially when you're dealing with suicide hotlines in psych hospitals, which I worked at. I was certified at that. And one of the things you do is you actively listen to these people that call in with their problems, because a lot of them just want to talk. They're not really suicidal or whatever. And you don't want to get people to overreact and cut you off because you're not really listening to them. So I try to listen to them very often because they know a little bit about who I am. They're very careful about their speech. So they're kind of thinking, what's this guy thinking when I'm saying this? And in some sense, you kind of let them hang themselves because what they're saying doesn't make a lot of sense when they're defending the guru. So then at some point in active listening, you say, slow down, and you ask a permission question. You say, you just said this a couple sentences ago. Do you mind if we revisit that? And if I ask you a question about it? So now you're giving them power, and this is all about a power game at that point. They believe that you're trying to take power from them, and they have power because of this power of knowledge of who they believe the guru is. So they give you permission, and now you have an opening to address something. And you watch the body language, you see if they're drifting away and not really listening, which people do. They get passive aggressive sometimes when you're trying to educate them about something and they act like they're listening or not. So you try to engage them in active conversation, engaging the prefrontal cortex, the part that filters information. Some people call it a bullshit detector, but it's that part of us which enables us to take time out to reason with a problem and try to turn it a different way and see if it looks different. In other words, you're reshaping it. You're remapping it a little bit and see if the territory changes, or you thought was the territory. And so, yeah, that's the best you can do. And some people, if they sense that you're getting too close to them not being able to verify what they're saying, they might stop. They might freeze at that point. I even say that to some. I'm assuming you're like me. You don't want to go around life being fooled. So I think this one thing you're telling me isn't correct. Do you mind me explaining why? I don't want you to be fooled. So you're actually trying to do them a favor. If you can get that point across, then you tell them, well, what you do with the information is fine. You can question me as much as you want. But so the idea that you can do them a favor, I think, is an important idea to get across if they can accept that. I've had people, for instance, that call in on the hospital hotline and they start cursing and yelling about everything and fuck this and fuck that and fuck you. And I say something like, I'd like to talk to you, but it's hard for you to understand because you're using these invectives. I think you're more intelligent than that. I would like us to have a good conversation. Could you just cut down on the F-bombs? And that often worked. I would appeal to their intelligence. The idea is to stop using these thought-terminating cliches to end conversations and point it out if somebody's using it on you. So using the word liberal can be a thought-terminating cliche. Using the word conservative can be a thought-terminating cliche.
Mm-hmm. Especially in the way that you say it.
It's the way you say it. It's the context you use it in and all of that. So my suggestion is to kind of practice, and it takes practice to do this, to learn how to slow the conversation down, learn how to add polite terms, show reciprocity, meaning if you listen, maybe they'll listen. That's the best you can do. It doesn't always work, but usually the person on the other end of that appreciates the fact that you treated them like a human being.
We've certainly heard that from other cult experts and specialists in terms of listening as well, just with if you have a friend or family member that's in something that you think is harmful in some way. Is there any other steps, just maybe this is a note we could end on because I'm aware that it's an hour and a half already, believe it or not. Any other steps or advice you'd have to give to loved ones who you think is in a cult or a belief system that's harmful?
Yeah, and, take a deep breath. In most cases, people in those groups work it out themselves. It might take years. The best thing you can do is to try to maintain a friendly relationship. And if you have to, remain neutral about the group. Don't get into arguments. Believe me, ex-members have come out of groups after 10 years and were so thankful that their parents didn't cut them off, didn't yell at them, didn't call them stupid, didn't try to intervene in some cases. And
thanks, Mom.
Yeah, and I exited myself out of the group. There was something about having gained your own power yourself without being it imposed on you. Mm-hmm. In other cases, the imposition, depending on how it's done, is very valuable and the person appreciates it in that time.
Sure.
For instance, the last case I did that was coercive was a young woman who was 19, who was controlled by her music teacher at a college, and he was using something called applied kinesiology, where you press on a person's arm,
yes,
and
muscle
they
testing.
think something, and like, are you allergic to beeswax? And then if the arm goes down, you might be. If it doesn't go down, you're not. That kind of. And he was using it to test her spirituality, all kinds of stuff, and it led to complete control, and then some sexual type of weird stuff was going on.
Shocker.
No intercourse, but so we did this intervention. The brother was involved, and a former cop that came in, and she agreed to talk to me after we got going. And the way I got through to her to understand how that mechanism was affecting her was I was teaching her something about radionics, which is testing whether something's positive or negative with a pendulum. It's something that New Agers do to see if it's a good piece of fruit or if it's the right job to get.
I've seen that.
Yeah, they swing this pendulum back. It's called radionics. And so I showed her how there's nothing to that other than the idiomotor effect. You're actually doing the swinging without knowing it. It's subconscious. And once she saw that, the whole belief system of the applied kinesiology fell apart for her. Like, there's another one of those aha moments.
Yeah.
And if there's somebody listening to this episode who wants to take the next step, are you still for hire? Can they reach out to you?
Yeah, I do consultations. I usually do a free intake interview for 15, 20 minutes to see if it's even feasible. And then we set up a schedule and go step by step. It may or may not lead to an intervention. People might have looked at my information and already decided in their heads that, which they sometimes do, say, I need you, I need your help. Can you fly to India? It's one of the cases I did 2 years ago. The family flew me all the way to India to do an intervention.
Well, I know that we could probably do like a 10-hour mini-series with you of all your stories. You've got some really good ones, and I'd love to have you back and unpack some of those things. But for now, thank you so much for your time and
thank you, Joe.
Your wisdom.
You're welcome. Thank you. I appreciate being here with you guys.
Yeah, we learned so much, and encourage people to read your book or reach out if they need help. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Joe, thanks for sharing your information with us. Kicking addiction, deprogramming from a cult is really hard, including for the families involved. We hope this conversation helps people approach loved ones who are being manipulated. And I'll remind you, the hint, don't argue.
That is really, really good advice.
Start with that.
I feel like this could have been a 10-parter. Joe has so much information, and we really appreciate the time you spent with us, Joe, and also your patience. I feel like this was an episode we've been talking about doing since we started.
That's right.
Hope you all enjoyed the conversation as much as we did.
Thank you for listening, everyone. We will see you next time
On A Little Bit Culty.
ABC.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean, hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
We hope you're enjoying A Little Bit Culty. If so, please do show us some love. Drop a rating or leave a review. Hit subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/alittlebitculty.
Even better, send this episode to someone who needs it. Maybe they're in a cult. Maybe they're just a little bit susceptible. Or maybe they just love a good story. Spread the word, spread the love. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.
A Little Bit Culty is a Trace 120 production.
Executive produced by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames in collaboration with producer Will Rutherford at Citizens of Sound. Our co-creator is Jess Temple Tardy.
Our production coordinator is Leslie Dinsmore.
Writing by Sandra Namoto and social media marketing by Eric Swarzinski and Brooke Keene.
Our theme song, Cultivated, is by the artists John Bryant and Nigel Aslan.